And I'm going to start by saying welcome and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. My name is Louise Siddons, and I organize monthly caller workshops for Scissortail Traditional Dance Society of Oklahoma. Generally speaking, our workshops train emerging callers and offer opportunities for experienced callers to try new things. But during the pandemic, we've moved our workshops online, and recently we've been opening them up to the public. So please note that this event will be recorded and posted online. This month, we're very pleased to welcome Cathy Campbell, who's going to chat with us about online calling and organizing. I posted this in the chat, but I'm just going to repeat it out loud. The ground rules for this webinar are that the chat is open for everyone, and make sure that if you want to talk to each other, you have your two lines set to all panelists and attendees. But if you want to ask Cathy specifically a question, please use the Q&A function, which is if you're on a computer at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Or raise your hand, which you can find by going into participants, and there should be a hand raising option for you. Rebekah Valencia will be monitoring the Q&A. Rebekah, you want to turn your video on and say hi quickly? So that's Rebekah. She is going to be moderating the Q&A and also keeping an eye out for raised hands and for problems in the chat. And if you're happy to have her read your question, please do use the Q&A feature. But if you raise your hand, she'll follow up with you about asking your question in person, and you can do that with audio and video. So if you want to do that, just be aware that because we're recording, you will be therefore in the recording. All right. Cathy has been calling English country dances since 2005. Her home group is Toronto English Country Dance Assembly. She has a broad repertoire of both historical and contemporary dances, and she's been calling a weekly Zoom dance since March 2020. Thank you for joining us, Cathy. And let me start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you start dancing and calling?
I started dancing in 2004, and I always wanted to dance, never had the opportunity, and I looked online, knowing nothing about any of this type of dancing, and saw something and said, oh, contra dancing is really easy to learn. So I just went to the local contra dance and just went in cold, loved it, thought, wow, where has this been all my life? And they were shutting down for this summer, and I thought, I can't not dance all summer. So they noticed that there was this thing called English country dancing that they had on every week. And I started going to that. I loved it as well. And then I just started, it was a small group. The English country dance group was small, and they needed some help with the calling. So I started calling about 6 months after I started dancing. And then first opportunity, I went to the English dance leaders course at Pinewoods, I think the next year, and took a course with Scott Higgs. And it was like I knew nothing. So it was great. And then I've been calling off and on since then. And then we started up another weekly dance in Toronto, the assembly that I call for. So we started that up 8 years ago. We've been dancing on Friday nights, usually 50 to 52 weeks a year, depending on when Christmas is. And I was the only caller for that for about 5 years. And then we've got a couple of more callers, and then we're looking to get some other people. We were looking to get some other people brought on before all this happened to expand the callers. So it's my life in calling.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's been tricky timing with new callers and the pandemic for sure.
Yeah, I kind of went back to calling every dance because I don't know. I have a small space here and I can't really dance. Mm-hmm. So the calling has been my outlet in the Zoom era of. And I think we were the second group that did an online dance, and I think our group has probably done. We had our 22nd dance last night. So we've been
I was going to say, because you started in March. And so I wondered if you had been to any other Zoom dance, if you had models that you were basing it on, or if you just made it up.
No.
And how you decided to do that.
No. So our first dance, we were I was like this in order to get close enough to the microphone
Right.
to be able to call. And we had all kinds of sound problems. And luckily, we have a couple of really techie people in our group that help out, and I got a microphone, which helps out a lot. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting, and we did it a couple of weeks just ourselves before we opened it up to the wider world. So
Hmm.
because our group,
We did our first one just for our group as
yeah,
well.
yeah, and how you've been going for a while as well, right?
We only do them monthly, but we started, I think April was our first one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, our
Yeah.
group, it was a real social gap too with our group. Is we were used to seeing each other every week on Friday, uh,
Right.
we started out the first one saying, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just hang out and chat. So,
Hmm.
um, but it's
That was a major motivator for us too, was keeping the community together.
mhm.
And so I wonder, who did you anticipate coming to the dances? And are the people that you anticipated the people who are still coming now, 20 something dances later?
We hoped we had this wild idea that we might be able to get new dancers coming from the Toronto area. And they don't have much to do. Maybe we can get some more people that have said they wanted to come now that there's not as much competition on a Friday night. But that didn't happen at all. And in fact, we ended up with about half of our normal numbers coming from Toronto. So we usually would have like 20 dancers. So we had maybe 10 who were willing to do it on Zoom. So we thought, why don't we just open it up and see who comes?
Hmm.
So we have a lot of people from across the United States. We have a very few people from Canada because I think they might have some local dances that they're doing. And we have regular attendees from Australia and sometimes from England or the UK,
Right.
depending on whether they're willing to stay up that late.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I was about to ask, do you hold them at the times that your regular dances are, or did
Yeah,
you adapt your schedule?
we haven't adapted our schedule. So we hold them. We used to have like 6:30 to 9 dances, and now we have 7 to 9, which is probably a half hour too late. But with our dances, with our weekly dances, we had people just kind of drop in for the second half, and people leave at the break anyway. So we figured it's the same thing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and the attendance does go down towards the end of the dance, but the people who want to dance can stay and dance, and we're willing to keep it going for the 2 hours with a short break in the middle. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, when you started the dances, how much were you thinking about adapting your programming? Did you do a program that would be dances you would have done in person?
Um, the first couple of times there was that pandemic list up on the Carolina English Country Dance. Back away. Okay, thank you. I'm just checking the chat here. Thanks, Claire. Um, the Yeah, so when we first started, I was checking out the Carolina English Country Dance list, and for the pandemic dances, but quickly decided that that wouldn't be enough. Um, that wouldn't be enough
It,
repertoire. Right, so
right, in terms of variety
yeah,
and
it's just doing a
yeah.
weekly dance. I didn't want to repeat a lot, and I wanted it to be more like our regular dances, where it's not so much the greatest hits all the time. It's try to do a wide a variety of program, and it's the I've got to stop watching the chat. Um, uh, it's sorry, what was the question again? I got distracted.
It was thinking about the variety of dances and how you adapted your program.
Yeah, yeah. So I started to take it more of looking like what dances will adapt well. How can we do a variety of music and repertoire, and what fits with the CDs I already have? Because we do recorded
Yeah.
music at our weekly dance as well. So and originally I stayed completely away from any contemporary dance composers because I wasn't sure about adapting I didn't want to have to ask permission every time I adapted somebody's dance, and so I was going back to older repertoire, which was interesting. It was a change to kind of go back to the repertoire that we wouldn't necessarily be doing these days, and
Right.
just to kind of revisit it based on these conditions. Um, and and lately I'm just doing anything. Because there's only so many. I only have recordings for so many dances, so I'm just basing it off the recordings I do have, and then uh, asking, uh, yes,
Forgiveness.
forgiveness rather than permission.
I was going to ask you, so in the beginning, were you contacting choreographers
Oh
about
no,
what you were doing, or
I haven't done that. It's just, um, yeah,
just
I,
felt sensitive? Yeah.
yeah, and we don't record our dances, and I
Hmm.
don't post. I haven't post. I posted a bunch of adaptations on the pandemic list, but I probably haven't posted anything for the last 2 months, just because I'm adapting. Feel that my adaptations are um, less unique, and a lot of people are adapting a lot of stuff just in their own groups, and it seems to be um, people are getting the hang of it, and it's very
Yeah.
individual, and it's kind of, I think that's interesting, and kind of the way
Me
it should
too.
be.
I wonder if it's going to have a lasting impact on dancers when we come back to dancing in person, if people are going to sort of rise up and say, we prefer if we did this instead at this part of the dance.
Well, if they're like my dance group, they won't remember. Maybe sometimes I've done like a dance of the month, and I've done the same dance for 4 weeks, and then on week 4, I say that's a really nice dance. We should do it again.
Oh,
So I
funny.
find that a lot of people, especially our local dance, they don't have that sensitivity to this is the way a dance is done anyway, because a lot of our local dancers don't necessarily travel to other
Yeah.
dances, and they're not, and a lot of them have started in the last 5 years, and they're not keyed in to the
Right.
tradition, you know.
Yeah. They haven't been doing Hole in the Wall for 37 years,
Yes.
so they're not wedded to its choreography.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think we benefit in a similar way at Scissortail. We have a lot of dancers who are local only, and we have a core group who's been doing it for a long time, but a lot of new dancers all the time as well. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of freedom. But also, we tend not to have a lot of repetition in our programs.
Yeah.
We never sat down and said we should do this core repertoire list
Mm-hmm.
over the course of a year or anything like that. So it's really up to the individual callers. Um, which leads into a question that I had for you, which is I can't imagine having to prepare a dance every single week. Um, how much time do you spend preparing, and how much repetition do you do just for your own sake?
Um, I usually prepare on Friday afternoons. So I take from 4 o'clock on to either um, review dances. I'll do, I'm aiming these days to do probably half the program new dances that I haven't done before, and then the other half repeat. But there was one a couple of weeks ago, I just was tired and I just repeated the whole program. So I can't remember how many dances I've done, but it's a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them work, and some of them you just toss the card after the dance and say, I'm never going to call that one again. That was a failed experiment. Um, and but it's, I find it surprising how many dances do work. So back to your question. So I usually do an hour and a half to 2 hours looking at dances, finding new dances, adapting them, writing the cards, and then another half hour just checking, doing the schedule of the program, which is probably more, it's more preparation time than I would have done for the weekly dance that we did before. So because I just I've got, and I usually call for my dance books. I don't do the cards, so I have a big thing of
Right.
dance books I just carry with me, and in matches the recordings, and I sometimes I'm just pulling stuff out or I was, and pre-Zoom stuff, just pulling stuff up and saying, well, that looks interesting. Let's try this out. Um, uh, and again, some things work. Most things work. Some things you just kind of go, no, never call that again. Right? So the same sort of idea. So about 2 hours, 2.5 hours per week.
Yeah. Um, I am also not supposed to be paying attention to the chat, but I do think it's charming that Cheryl has said that she's been coming to your dances since March and would not call any of them a failed experiment. So you're getting defended by your dancers. I love it. Rebekah, do you have a question from the audience for us?
Yeah, we have an audience member who would like to know, just in general, what are some of the basics that you would say are, how to start Zoom calling, or things to look out for, or anything like that?
So first would be the audio setup. And there's a lot of information there now on how to do that. And I think what we did was just do a tech check with a couple of people, set up a Zoom meeting with a couple of people in your group to check your audio settings. And I know I still have problems with that. I just got an email this morning saying they couldn't hear me last night. So, yeah, and because the problem with doing this is you have no feedback as to how you sound, right? Or how the music sounds. And the balance that you think you might have is just may not work. So if you try to balance it yourself, it's not going to work. So that's the first thing, is to get your audio settings as good as you can get them. Second thing is, I think you have to know your audience. Our dances ended up having a lot of experienced dancers for whatever reason. So that really means I haven't had to teach figures pretty well at all. And if I do, I'll get somebody to demonstrate. And if you get somebody who's totally brand new, say just sit and watch the dance, and then try it out. And again, we try not to worry if somebody's getting it. Like, you may have a group of whatever, and there may be some people who are just not getting it. Just try not to watch them. It's like, don't watch that screen. And then when you're calling, so the teaching, I normally teach, and then I'll ask anybody to unmute themselves if they have questions, and then just mute everybody again and go on with the dance. And then I do watch. Some people don't watch what's going on the screens, or they're dancing at the same time. I do watch because I like to see if people are getting it. And it also, I may not say much during the actual dance when I'm calling, but I can see where things are kind of going off the rails and adjust either for the next dance, or I can say something as the dance is going on. Whether or not people pay attention is another thing. So I treat it like regular calling. I am paying attention. I'll switch between screens. I'll watch the overall flow, knowing that it's not representative of the timing. So everybody's not going at the same time, but I can see whether people are actually getting the dance or not. So that would be
that was a real challenge for me. Yeah. I like watching, but I had a hard time in our first dance keeping my calls with the music when I was watching the dancers. So yeah, that was a skill in itself. And was one of the things that felt most different to me, is that I couldn't be as immediately responsive to the dancers because of the lag time. Do you notice big differences between calling on Zoom and calling in person apart from that?
Yeah, I'm more appreciative of individual differences in how people are approaching the dance. And I really like to see that. If I was calling in a group, I would probably discourage a lot of the things that are going on, but because it's not a group settings, people can do their own thing. And sometimes I'll pick something out. Like last night, somebody was doing a particular move that really work to fill out the time. So I just inserted that person's move into the call for the next round of the dance. And that kind of thing is it's a plus, I think, for Zoom dancing, is everybody is can kind of express themselves more. And that's the real bonus, I think, of this type of dancing, compared to regular calling, where you're much more of a kind of having to, well, not be a, but you have to be kind of more strict, I think, when you're calling a regular dance, because a lot of the stuff, and dancers are very adaptable. They're not doing this kind of stuff. They won't be doing this kind of stuff when it comes back to regular dancing. But it's kind of interesting to figure out the boundaries of what's acceptable, I guess. Anyway, I'm rambling. Move on.
No, it's good. You were rambling in answer to a question I hadn't asked yet, which was what you enjoy about Zoom calling.
Yeah.
And where you get your energy from as a Zoom caller. You know, a lot of callers before the pandemic, I think, would have said that their energy for calling comes from the interaction with people and kind of the music and the crowd and all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you hinted at that when you said, you know, one of the things that you make a point of doing is watching, and that I assume helps you feel much more connected than you might if you were just sort of calling and looking off to the side. Which I'll freely admit is what I did that first time once I realized that I was calling to random cameras instead of with the music. I'm a little better now, but it was a learning curve for me. But where do you, like, what gives you the energy to keep doing this? What inspires you?
Yeah, I think watching the dancers, seeing everybody dancing, and it's interesting because we have regulars now from all over the place, and they feel comfortable to unmute themselves and make a comment, and there's a little bit of chatter between dances, and we're trying to do that. I know some groups, they keep everybody muted all the time, but I try to, after the dance, unmute for 10 seconds at least, to allow people to clap or say something or comment, and to have that bit of an interaction, which to me is much more. I've gone to some of these Zoom dances where everybody's muted, and I kind of, it feels too much like a performance in some ways, and we're trying to make it more like a weekly dance, a community dance. So that's where I get my energy, is watching that. And also I do have to kind of, get ready to do it. And it's a lot less automatic than going to a regular dance, and then you do get automatic energy from the crowd, right? So
yeah. Do you solicit feedback specifically, or do you just allow it to come as it comes?
I allow it to come. I haven't solicited it, but I get it.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And I'm grateful for it. That's all. It's all good.
Yeah, we started sending out a survey after our dances just to kind of get some of the responses that we didn't feel like we were getting from the conversation afterwards or in the break. But I found that people are actually very generous in the level of feedback that they'll offer in a chat or in the break when we have a chance to just chat as a group. And it's been really useful for us. Do you go to other dances? You said that you don't have space to dance.
I don't have a space. I started when I first was doing it. I did, and then I just got frustrated. So I haven't been lately. But I need to start again. It's good to just even see what other people are doing. But I haven't been in the last couple of months. I've hardly been going to anything else at all. And I just get tired of Zoom. I get tired of stuff.
Yeah. Changing the subject a little bit and thinking about specific dances. When you go to adapt a dance, what are your priorities? How are you approaching it?
I'm looking at the path of the primarily the ones. So I adapt a dance. Usually I adapt it for a 2-person dance, figuring it's easier to have one ghost rather than three if you're dancing by yourself. And so I'm optimizing it for that. And I'm also trying to get there's certain dances where there's a lot of neighbor interaction and it's a lot about the geometry of the four people in the set that I don't think work that well for adaptation. There's a lot of Gary Rudman dances I really love, but a lot of them have that complexity where it doesn't translate well. The whole point of the dance is that interaction with the three other people in your set, or five other people in your set. And what seems to work is where there's an interesting path for the ones, and then you can just modify that to maybe have some ghost interaction with the neighbors, but mostly it's just a single path, or even adapting corners to be partner. Done a lot of that stuff. And a lot of the dances seem to go clockwise too much. So I've adapted things to switch up the direction, because otherwise people kind of get dizzy. It's easy when you have somebody, easier when you've got, like, you're circling left and then your partner two-hand turn and then right shoulder round or something like that. And when you have people, it's to connect to, it's easier. When you're doing it by yourself, it's just a lot of circling clockwise. So I try to change up the direction of travel so that it feels like the same dance, but it gives a bit of variety that way.
Mm-hmm. A question from the audience.
Since we're on this topic already, are there any specific figures that you would avoid or that you try to avoid using?
No, I'll offer a substitution. Like a poussette needs a lot of space, and that can be substitute. Like a back-to-back feels like a poussette. So I'll say, if you've got the room to do a poussette, do it. If not, you can do like a right shoulder back-to-back and the left shoulder back-to-back. The complicated figures that rely on the whole set, I would tend doing meanwhile things. I would either just leave out the meanwhile part of it, the second part of it, and just do one part of that, right? So I was looking at Fentaleric yesterday and thinking, how could I adapt that? And I didn't come up with a good answer. That's an example of a figure that it's so like clockwork with the four people that it would be difficult to adapt. Though I'm still thinking about it. So there's nothing right off the bat I would say I wouldn't do. Some take more thought.
Do you find that most of the people who are coming to your dances are dancing as solo dancers, or do you have a lot of couples?
We have a lot of couples. I would say maybe a third are couples and the rest are solo dancers. So right. That's good. We even have had a couple of people with two couples in the dance.
Nice.
But that's hard for them to adapt, but they seem to be doing okay. Yeah, so I would say about a third couples and 2/3 solo dancers.
When you're doing an adaptation, you said you do it mostly for kind of from a couple's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Do you change things like when it's a circle 4? Do you change your call to say it's a 2-hand turn? How much do you adapt for like reality versus calling as though ghosts are present?
And sometimes, so like a circle, sometimes I'll call it a circle and just try to get them to do an open circle of 4. So circle with your imaginary neighbors. If it makes sense to turn it into a 2-hand turn, I'll do that. Just to get some variety. Otherwise, it just becomes a series of 2-hand turns sometimes. Right. And one person or two people can remember, can get the feel of a circle even doing it, I think. Themselves, and I wasn't considering that so much when I started, but the more I've been doing it, the less I've been adapting dances, and more just kind of calling them that way. Mostly because it seems to be a pretty experienced group of dancers. So I'm going with that. And when we started, I had no idea who was going to show up. So.
Right. You mentioned early on that you had gone back to older repertoire. And one of the things that I've discovered as a dancer is that I enjoy, for example, things like USA dances, which I would not ordinarily sort of leap for joy with on a regular program. I completely love as a solo dancer. There's something about the pattern and the repetition and the kind of bounciness of a lot of that choreography that I enjoy doing alone. And so in contrast, the flowy dances can often have exactly that problem you were articulating of being like just all circling clockwise all the time.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you've noticed people responding differently to dances than they used to.
Yeah, I think the USA dances are the prime example because a lot of them work really well because, as you say, they have that structure and they're not always circling and yeah, and I find that I'm doing at least one or two of those per program where I wouldn't in a regular one I wouldn't because I would get feedback and say no, not one of those. Actually, no, our group would be fine with it, but I know that it's unless they're particularly interesting ones, they wouldn't necessarily work. So a lot of the dances, like Dick's Maggot, which we did last night, is a dance that I think I've done it once in a regular dance, and it's never gotten a good reception. But as a Zoom dance, it works really well because you don't have to worry about your twos getting out of the way. It's got an interesting pattern, and yeah, and the music's great. So a lot of the dances that we wouldn't, I'm finding that some of the dances that work, often cases, are the dances that are not big in the repertoire right now.
Yeah. Have you been tempted or have you written new dances?
I wrote a dance. I wrote a dance. I have the Gold Crest CD, and they've got some contra dance tunes on it. So they had no, not Blue Bonnets, Blackbird Pie, which is actually a tune by Darren Douglas called Yellow Song. And so I had the track, and it was for a contra dance. And I thought, this could be an English country dance tune. So I wrote a dance to it for this format. So yeah, and I'll probably do some more. Depending on how long this lasts.
Is it safe to assume that dance is on the dance pandemic list if people want to go find it?
Oh no, I'll add it. I forgot. It's been so long since I've posted anything to the dance pandemic list that I forgot. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that one and post it.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it partly because Margaret just updated that page pretty significantly. So it might be getting renewed interest. But I know whenever we mention something, then people always follow up with like, what was that thing you mentioned and where can we find it? So,
and if people are at my dance and they want the choreography, you can always just email me. I think they all have my email because it's on the list. Right. Or, I'm quite happy to. Particularly, I won't put anything on the pandemic list by any living choreographer because I think that's not fair, right? It's so I won't put anything by a living choreographer on there, but I'll post. I'll go through. I haven't posted anything on there for months. I'll go through and winnow out the stuff that I think might be useful and post it again. So
yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to circle back to this question of attendance and that you started the dance because you wanted to kind of maintain the community that people felt partly about dancing, but just partly with each other. And I wonder if you think that this experience is changing your dancers' experience of the dance community?
Yeah, I think it's great for them to see people from other dance communities. And I think the whole thing, another big bonus of the Zoom dance world is it's expanded everyone's idea of what the dance community is, so that people from everywhere are meeting new people in the dance community that they wouldn't have met otherwise, right? Which I think is wonderful. And I think when we get back to dancing in real life will be a big bonus. Like it's a lot more cohesive community, I think, than it was 5 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, our dances, we've started having just a separate social Zoom dance, Zoom chat every 2 weeks, just to kind of keep in touch, because otherwise, for the social cohesion for our group in particular. And we did a dance in the park on Thursday, where we had we all were masked, we all distanced, we all had pool noodles to keep to fend off the other dancers. So we had pool noodles. So you could turn by holding the end of the pool noodles. And yeah, so that was fun. So we're going to keep doing that once a week. Now that the numbers are reasonably low in Toronto, and we feel safe doing that outdoors now. So, but
that's really charming.
Yeah.
A question.
Okay, so the question from the chat related to all of this is how do you run your Zoom chat social thing? Is it like anybody can talk when they want to, or is it moderated somehow? Or
the social thing, our bi-weekly group, it's maybe 16 people, so we just talk. We don't and when we do our regular Zoom dances, we have like a 5-minute break, and people can just unmute themselves and talk. We don't do breakout rooms or anything like that. Just not. By the time we do the breakout room and bring everybody back, it would be difficult, and we just haven't figured out how to do it yet. That too. Okay.
Can I jump in with another question from the chat? Sure. Carol has asked how many dancers attended your outdoor dance with
we had 12, and we limited to we didn't invite everybody from our group. We just sort of said limited to 12 to see how it was an experiment, right? We were seeing if we could, if people felt safe, if we could do the dances with enough distance, and it seemed to work pretty well. We did one like solo dance with everybody facing in the same direction, and then we did a couple of couple dances, and we even did a long ways just to see how it would work. So it seemed to work pretty well. I've no medical background, but to me, dancing with masks outside seems to be fairly low risk. And we followed all the regulations about keeping distance. There may have been times when people were within 6 feet, but it was minimal. So, yeah, it seemed to work well.
Another question from the chat about these outdoor dances. Did you modify any of the dances? Specifically, like the example here is it takes longer to circle when you're all 6 feet apart. You can't get there in 8 steps, maybe.
Sort of. Just mostly. So the two dances we did in three couple sets were turning by threes and Leah's waltz. So turning by threes was had some difficulty as far as people getting around in enough time. But it seemed to work okay. I think it's more individual modification. People have to take longer steps, and we'll definitely be doing probably more modification because those two seem to be pretty good as far as being distanced, but other ones um, are not. So it's tricky, I think.
Yeah.
That's the next challenge.
Yeah. So do you anticipate if you, I mean, it sounds like you anticipate continuing to do them, will you start opening them up? I'm wondering a little bit about new dancers. And one of the things that I think I haven't seen a community really succeed in is attracting new dancers to a Zoom dance, that there's too many barriers to participation.
Um, my colleague Alan Rosenthal at our he's running a every 2 week Zoom dance that has it's more. I don't know if he has any actual beginners, but he was running a beginners group. So I
Hmm.
think it's kept going with that kind of teaching idea. Um, yeah, I think it would be very difficult to attract new dancers. Um,
Yeah, it seems more plausible with pool noodle park dancing.
yes. Yes, that is a possibility, and it was fun. We had pool noodle fights. So anyway,
Right. It seemed right. I mean, I'm imagining this event and thinking that it is goofy enough that the
yeah,
intimidation barrier goes down significantly.
yeah, yeah. The gracefulness is not probably the primary characteristic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, has your experience or kind of sense of self as a caller changed over the course of the last 6 months?
Um, yeah, I think it's kind of fun doing some stuff that people haven't done before,
Mhm.
and it's for newish callers coming into this tradition. It can be a bit intimidating because it's just a real high level of it's a long path to becoming an experienced dance caller, especially with English. And there's just like I don't travel to call, but now I feel like I am every week.
Exactly.
And I got a chance to call at the Atlanta English Country Dance, which was
Hmm.
wonderful. Yeah, so I think yeah, just being able to do something different and call for people in different parts of the world is interesting, and it also broadens my experience of what other dance communities are doing, um, and what dances people know, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's for me, it's been a positive experience despite everything else
Yeah.
that's going on. So,
Right. Exactly. It's a paradox of our time, I think.
mm-hmm,
Um, for those of us who've been exploring these, yeah, new opportunities and interesting new ways to think about our community,
mm-hmm.
and what we do, for sure. I just want to pause and note that it's about 10 minutes to the hour, and so we usually go about an hour and 15 minutes. But at this point, I would love to turn it over more thoroughly to audience questions. Um, I'm sure Cathy and I could keep going, but one of the points of this is to hear from all of you. So
Yeah.
if you do have questions and if you want to join in and ask them yourself, now is the time. And I think Rebekah mentioned that she had a question from Jim.
Yeah. So if you need a demo, how do you work with demos on Zoom?
Um, it's difficult. If I can catch somebody doing it right, I can ask them to demo it. Um, if it's just for the one person part, I've got a couple of model dancers in my own group I can call on, and I've called on other dancers, and it's been touch and go as far as whether people are getting it. So demos are difficult. unless you've got it lined up ahead of time, I find.
Do you
You
do you
developed,
like
oh, sorry.
spotlight that
Yes.
dancer?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you developed strategies for teaching verbally that you haven't had to necessarily rely on in the past?
Yes. I don't know what, I'm not quite sure what they are. It's just trying to be very more careful with my words again than I was in calling in real life. In real life. And then just try to think about it in this context, right? So a lot of it's translation from what we would have done in a set dance to people dancing on their own or dancing with a partner,
Mhm.
and working to get it more clear. So I've changed a lot of the wording on the calls to be clear for one or two people, and particularly direction. So the first, so okay, so this is a whole other. I'm thinking back now to when we first started. When we first started, people were very confused about the directions in their own individual dance hall. So um, spent a lot of time the first few weeks getting people to think about where, where up is, where down is, across, and just the basic where they were going, and adapting my calls to be very clear, try to be very clear about whether people are facing across, up or down, uh, and that's the biggest change. Um, and that's about that, and positional calling instead of gendered calling. And just called it, kind of fell into that because I just was looking at it and saying, there's an improper dance or a proper dance. It doesn't matter. You've got one dance and one, and this kind of thing, and just dropping a lot of all of the gendered terms,
Yeah.
and just going to positional calling.
One of the things that I've noticed as I have been thinking about dances is that when I start working with a dance, I always start from the top first corner, kind of by default. And I've been running workshops where we've had a conversation about why I do that and how it changes. But as a caller, I realized that our dancers are lining up on the side that they feel most familiar with,
Yep.
right? And so my calls had to become side neutral.
Yes. Yes.
And I wonder if you've noticed, just thinking about, because I already had been calling positionally for a few years. So the gender issue was like pre-solved.
Mm-hmm.
But this side neutrality, I don't know what to call it apart from that, was not something that I had solved already. And so I spent some time working through that.
Yeah, I think that's so. Originally, I was doing everything with the corners with your partner, and then I've started adding. So saying, if you're a first corner, do this. If you're a second corner, do this. Do it. First corner, so that people have a bit of a break, and it also feels a bit more like the original dance.
Yeah.
And that's about the only side difference I've done. And it's interesting how little it actually does rely. The side thing actually matters. Once you get
Exactly.
into it, it's like it's another thing with the Zoom adaptations is it really takes everything down to the bare bones with the dance, right? So
Yeah.
it's very useful that way. Are there questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. One of them, do you consciously modulate your stage presence for Zoom calling versus in-person calling?
Yeah, I think of myself as a radio announcer when I'm doing the Zoom calling. Like it's a late night kind of mellow vibe. And then and with the regular calling, I'm a bit more up. I think so. And also because I can actually move around when I'm calling regular. So yeah. that's about it.
We also have a question from the chat about any solutions to the length of some of the recordings, or finding recordings of the right length. Do you do any editing of the music, or
no. Now, sometimes I'll stop it.
Stop it early.
Stop it. Yeah. I mean, you just click the off button. I've had that when the dance isn't working particularly well, and just stop the dance, stop the music. And I think the dancers are fine with that. I haven't had any complaints of stopping the music early. It sounds a bit abrupt, but 5 seconds later they've forgotten. So I would say just stop the music. It's a low cost solution.
Do you find in general? I mean, one of the advantages of set dances is a lot of the recordings are short already.
Yeah, that's good.
But do you find that you are leaning towards running dances shorter?
No, because we usually have had dances to recorded music, and most of the recordings are pretty good length. And I think last night there was one that was just going on, and I should have stopped it, but just let it go. I'm not sure if this is that much of a problem. I know I've had people say it's a problem, but then I've seen people happily dance something 8 times through. So I'm not sure if it's that much of a problem. I just usually, like, there's maybe 3 times when I shut the music off. Usually it's not, it hasn't been a problem. People are dancing. As I say, people come and go too. And people stop and watch if they're tired.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We get through like 13.
I found that.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I found that a lot of the people who were chiming in early to say shorter is better were the very experienced dancers who were nailing it the first time through. And then we're like, okay, we've done this 5 or 6 times. Sort of, that's plenty. And some of our newer dancers have said that they like, sort of, they finally get it on the 3rd or 4th time, and then it ends a little too soon for them. So I think there's a pretty wide spectrum actually of how long people can do it. And a lot of people at this point have been saying things like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what you do because you're solo. Like, I'll call something and you dance whatever makes you happy. And I think similarly, if something's going on too long, you can always stop and take a water break, or stop and watch the dancers who are still dancing and kind of get different enjoyment. But you can't keep dancing once the music stops. I mean, you could. but so I've found myself leaning toward 6 or 7 instead of 5. There's a lot of conversation there, but I actually think that it's one of those things that we as callers and organizers maybe overthink compared to how the dancers are experiencing it.
Yeah, and I think so. Most of the Bare Necessities recordings, they average around 7 times each. I don't think that's fine. Maybe because I'm not dancing, I'm not experiencing the problem with it going on too long, but I think it's so we do like 13 dances usually in our 2 hours. So there's a lot of dancing. So if people want to take a break, or if they want to leave early, people are tired, they leave early. It's fine, or they come for the first hour and then they leave, and it's fine. But what we're just providing is a lot of opportunity to dance, and people can take that opportunity, or they can relax and enjoy watching relax and enjoy the music. So it's not I don't see it as a big problem, but I know other groups have said that.
I want to ask you a 2-part question. We discovered that we had people coming to our Zoom dances who hadn't come to regular dances in years because they can't dance anymore. But they wanted to come and listen, and it was a way for them to reconnect with the community without having to constantly turn down partner invitations that they couldn't accept. But we also have people who haven't been able to join because of technology issues or kind of other concerns. And so I'm wondering if you have had similar experiences, sort of who's been left out of your dances and who maybe has come that you didn't expect or hadn't seen in a while.
So we've had a few dancers who come from outside of the city and they would never probably drive in. We've got one woman who's older and used to be a big part of the dance community, but she's looking after her husband who has dementia. So
Right.
she can only make it by Zoom, right? So she can only do it by Zoom. We've got some people coming in by phone. And there's a number of our dancers. It's not necessarily a technology thing, but they just don't like the Zoom dancing. A lot of our local dancers. And it's a taste thing, right? So some people are working. One of our younger dancers, and he works all day on Zoom, and the last thing he wants to do is do a dance on Zoom. So and we're thinking about a lot of the things something that's come up in our dance quite a bit is what do we do when everybody goes back and these people can't, right? They can't. We're leaving people out of our community, and I think we've been leaving out people out of our community for many years. Once they get to the point of not being comfortable getting out of the house, they have some physical challenges. So yeah, and I think I see the question in the chat: might Zoom regular dances when they revive for the shut-ins? Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I might run a dance just for people who can't keep running who can't come to the regular dances because it's there's people that drop out and we just don't know why too. Often we'll have people and they stop coming, and if they aged out and they don't necessarily tell us. So
Exactly. Yeah. This is sort of an unfair question because it's one that I didn't tell you I would ask ahead of time, but if you had to distill your experience of Zoom dancing into 3 things that you would want to share with people who didn't experience it, what do you think those would be?
The joy in watching people dancing at the same time from all over the continent. That would be number 1. Unexpected community. And the third thing is I've had a lot of fun adapting dances. I think there's a lot of fun, a lot of joy in taking stuff and adapting it. So those would be the 3 things.
Yeah. Is there anything that you wish I'd asked you that I didn't?
I think we've covered I think we've covered a lot. I find this really strange that I don't see everybody on the screen. Like that it feels like I know there's people there.
Yeah, to be having this whole conversation about community and we dumped them all into the chat.
So I'd love to wave to everybody and see them if that's possible. I don't know if you can even change it after you start it.
Yeah, well, and I think the only way to do that would be to make everyone a panelist. And I don't know how many panelists I'm allowed to make. I should disclose. This is our first webinar, and we did it as a webinar primarily, to be honest, to facilitate the recording of it.
Yep.
And so Claire's asked, why is it a webinar instead of a Zoom meeting? And that was our theory. um, and yeah, in practice, I do think it's fascinating how we're kind of performing the limitations of the medium and some of the benefits of a meeting instead of a webinar, and that they're the same as the value that we find in the meeting for dancing as well. But Rebekah.
Okay, from the chat. Many Zoom dances seem to feature very few pretty dances in 3.2 and 3.4. Is it harder to adapt these for Zoom?
Sometimes. I did a program last night where it seemed to be like a half of the dances were in 3.2 or 3.4, and it was just kind of the luck of the draw. It is. I think it is because it's either the energy, to keep the energy up. I found that I have to do like the bouncy dances enough so that people kind of just don't lose interest. So I don't think it's a matter of adaptation. It's a matter of managing the energy of the group. And that's I think that's maybe part of the reason, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that a lot of 3/4 dances in particular, they have the trouble that you were describing earlier of they're really designed for a hands 4, and the interactions, a lot of them are not inherently interesting for a solo dancer. They're the kind of dances that turn into we are just circling clockwise for the entire dance, because they let the flowy ones lend themselves to flow, right?
Yeah,
and so often when we have weight that we can share with other dancers, that doesn't feel bad, but as a solo dancer you just get dizzy, and it's repetitive.
I see a lot of people have very little space too, and it makes it difficult. If you have like a 12-step back to back, that's kind of the limit of the limit of people's living rooms. I see an interesting question in the chat. Is it hard to move the energy of the dancers on Zoom? I don't find it hard. I think it comes across. It's amazing that you can. If I'm sitting here watching, I can tell whether people are enjoying the dance or not, or where their energy is, if their energy level is being enhanced by the dance, rather.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Because I am looking at the time and thinking we're wrapping up anyway, so it's a great moment for those last questions.
Do you dance demo while calling? No. As I said, I don't have a good camera, and I don't have a lot of room. So sometimes I try to demo with my hands, and it doesn't work very well.
But at least you can say sort of you are moving like this around each other. Yeah.
Yes, I can do that. But I've got mine set on mirror on. So this is my right hand.
Okay.
This is my left hand. So it's very, for me, that's confusing. But if I have to put up any text, it'll be right way up round. I use Wi-Fi. And for the Atlanta dance, I plugged in an Ethernet cable. So for Wi-Fi seems to work fine when it's just me. If I'm connecting, like the Atlanta dance has this really neat setup where they've got the band sending the music to me, and then me sending out music with the calls and live music. And for that, you definitely need hardwired to your modem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being with us. This was a great conversation.
Thank you very much.
And we'll hang out for a few more minutes so people can still ask questions. And if you would like to raise your hand, we'll just start making people panelists as much as we can, and then you can chat with us in the group. So if you want to stick around and become a panelist and have a more meeting-like experience, raise your hand, and Rebekah and I will try to do that. I say, although I'm not sure I can see people's raised hands. Oh, I do.
Oh, there's somebody.
Ooh, Alan, hi.
Yeah.
Whoop, I'm muted, and there we are. Hello.
Ah,
Here you are.
hey.
Hi.
How are
So
you?
I don't have a direct question, but I thought I'd try raising the hand and see if it was visible, just to see if it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been doing a lot of Zoom calling?
No, I have done exactly one thing, and I have a bunch of ideas about how one ought to do it, and for this one thing, which was Regency dancing for the Drunk Austin convention.
Right.
Back in June. Right, I thought through how I like to do stuff. I usually want to do as positional as I can, and I usually want to do least reference to partners, et cetera, et cetera. Thought all that through, and I realized what they really wanted was gentlemen and ladies,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
Duke of Kent's waltz as little modified as possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to go with what the crowd needs.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great question, though. I mean, implied in there is, Cathy, have you had moments of like you had this theory about how a thing would go and it went completely differently?
Well, I started doing some of the, like Alan's solo dance. The first one you put up, Alan, onto that pandemic list. So I was thinking we would do a lot more of that type of dance.
Mm-hmm.
And then, no.
Yeah.
Because it just took quite a while to teach, but then we didn't have the same people coming back every week. So I just kind of defaulted to just the regular ECD stuff, which I find probably maybe less interesting, but it was, I think that was kind of like what the crowd wanted.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah. And I've talked about having like an advanced Zoom dance where we do that kind of thing, but I don't know what the audience would be.
Yeah.
I think,
I'm not. Go ahead.
We have a real tension between people who want to do the same dances over and over and like really get to know them and love them and have this familiar experience, and people who want something sort of brain tingly each time. And we have a pretty nice mix. When at all of our dances we have 5 different callers, so we have everything from family dances all the way up to that slightly nerdy dance. And people, like you were saying earlier, Kat, they just can kind of sit in or sit out as they want to. But I think it's worked well to have workshops where it's clearly labeled. You know, I go to a couple of dances as a dancer that are explicitly for experienced dancers. And then you know what you're getting into. And if you're like, well, you know, this is too much for me, you can opt out. But for the community dance, that's just about maintaining our rhythm in the dance community. Like Alan was saying about his Drunk Austin dance, like you just gotta read the room, right? And do what they need.
Yeah. And I think a lot of these dances are about comfort in a difficult time too. It's and I've thought about that more as we've gone along, and less concerned about doing difficult dances, and even the dances that are supposedly difficult are not so difficult when there's only one person dancing them. You could do a pretty complicated dance, and if you're just doing the one pass, it's not that complicated. So I've done some dances that I wouldn't have done necessarily in our group just because of the complexity. And then if I look at it as a Zoom dance, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Okay. Claire just asked a question that I think is for Louise. It's about how you publicize the community dance.
I did not see that question.
It's in Q&A.
Okay, that's Rebekah's job, Alan. You're messing with our system here.
Sorry.
I mean, our dance, when I say community dance, I mean a dance for the Scissortail dance community, and we send it out to our mailing list, and whoever shows up, shows up. So that advertising is pretty straightforward. And happens the same way that it did in real life, although we've had people from all over the world adding themselves to our mailing list now that we're on Zoom. But we still really focus those dances on serving the needs of Oklahoma dancers. And for us, the big difference between our Zoom dance and our regular dances is our regular dances were chopped up. We had English twice a month, we had contra twice a month, we had an advanced English dance, we had a collar workshop. And now in one monthly dance, we do a little bit of all of those things. So yeah. Eric, do you have a question?
Yeah, Cathy, you said you spent about 2 hours prepping. I know you've also said you don't have a lot of space. Do you actually get to walk through the dances, or do you just have to try them live?
I try them live, which is why sometimes they are less than ideal. But I try to like picture them in my head. So. And he's gone.
Do you feel like that's an advantage of the weekly dance, is that you like there's less invested? I feel like when we only dance once a month, I'm like, oh, the dances we do have to be like, they have to succeed, which is a lot of pressure in a funny kind of way. Yeah.
So I find having a weekly dance, and we've always kind of said that the weekly dances weren't going to be perfect. You know, we try to do them as well as possible, but they're not necessarily everything is going to work, right? So it's an opportunity to try things out.
And the people at home have much more freedom, as you pointed out earlier, to adapt what you're saying, to experiment. They don't have to successfully interleave with other dancers. So if your instructions don't work, they can make them work in different ways.
And they do. That's one of the fun things, is seeing how people adapt things. And some of it's just wonderful. I thought, well, why didn't I think of that? They're doing a great job of just making it work in their space. And it's
I think it's one of the most interesting parts of what's happening.
And it's also it's a lot better than it was at the beginning. At the beginning, where people will say, well, where is up, where is down, how do I know where I am? There was a lot of confusion or less now, a lot less now.
All right, do we have any other questions from anybody? Otherwise, I think I'm gonna call us done. We've run a little bit over our hour and 15, so thank you again, Cathy, for joining us for this time, making time in your weekend for us.
Thank you. And
thank you to everyone who came and asked questions, and we will see you at our next workshop, I hope, or at our dance next Saturday night or Friday night. I don't even know what day our dances are on, but it's Friday. And you can find out more at scissortail.org, which is our website. And you can join our mailing list there too. Thank you everyone for coming.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, Cathy.